Benvenuti. Scusate questo piccolo ritardo nell'inizio, ma...
Welcome. And well, sorry for this delay. There has been a small problem with Ambassador Valensise, but he will be joining us in a few minutes. I will start introducing our event that puts together two different themes that actually are not usually mentioned together. It is not so easy to talk about a relationship between economic development, welfare, and well-being of a society, and the theme of religious freedom and religious fundamentalism. There's a link between religious freedom and the social development of a country, a nation. So this is an interesting topic, and since you know that here in Rimini at the meeting we always want to tackle new themes, this idea was born during a meeting with Brian Grimm, who works on this theme with his foundation. So that was actually the beginning of this idea that resulted in this panel of important speakers, and I'm going to introduce all our speakers, but then I will be saying something more. We have Antonio Tajani sitting next to me. He is a friend of the Rimini meeting. Most of you know him already. He's the Vice President of the European Parliament, and he is also responsible for the dialogue between religions in Europe. Then we have Lucio Battistotti, who is the head of the Italian representation of the European Commission. So with them, we will have a look at the European approach to this link. Sitting next to him, and sitting next to Antonio Tajani, we have Fouad Makhzoumi, who is a great entrepreneur, and he is the CEO of an international group with 3,500 employees. He comes from Lebanon, and he has a very interesting vision of the world on this theme. Then we have Brian Grimm, who is the president of the Religious Freedom and Business Foundation from the USA. We met in Rome with Victoria Alvarado, who's sitting here in the first row from the American embassy in Rome. I also see the ambassador, the Australian ambassador at the Holy Seat, and I would like to thank him for being here. And then Ambassador Valensise, who's the General Secretary of the Italian Foreign Affairs Ministry. And he will be joining us in a few minutes, as I was saying before. So this is going to be a very interesting conference, and I will leave the floor immediately to Antonio Tajani, who is, well, almost always present here at the meeting in Rimini. He's Vice President of the European Parliament. His history in the European institutions is quite long, even though he is still very young, and is also the delegate for the religious dialogue in Europe. So he is going to give us the European point of view on this theme. And I'm sure it's going to be extremely interesting, this European approach that we will be dealt with by him and by Lucio Battistotti. So economic development is a factor, an element to overcome the religious fundamentalism. Our title could become a question to our speakers. You have the floor. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you. Thank you for giving me once again the opportunity to participate in the Rimini meeting to talk about topical themes. And this is not a formal thing, because the theme we are dealing with this afternoon is extremely important. It's not only the theme of the dialogue between religions, and it's not only a theme that deals with economic factors. All these problems are linked one with the other, especially in Africa, especially in terms of the fight against terrorism, against ISIS, the inter-religious dialogue, how to avoid the persecution of Christian minorities in a wide part of the world. A few days ago, I was reading the news on Corriere della Sera on prosecutions against these minorities. And well, this situation of great instability actually leads to the flight from these areas and creates problems to Europe, because obviously these people come to Europe and they're desperate, and well, obviously there are also some, well, criminals, and there are other kind of people, but this is a problem. That of immigration is a problem. That is a problem that goes beyond Italy or Greece or France or Great Britain. It is a problem that actually concerns the whole world. So Europe is called upon to be active. We have to make a distinction between the European institutions, Commission and Parliament, and the Member States, because European institutions have always acted on these problems. Italy has received funds from the European institutions, but there are many Member States who actually are not ready to deal with this problem because it does not concern them, at the moment at least. Then, well, over the years, we realized that this is a problem that actually is a problem for all the European countries. You would probably remember the UK's response to this problem when Prime Minister Cameron said no to the distribution of quotas of refugees in Europe. UK said at the time, this is something that has to be dealt with by the countries where these people seek refuge. So, well, when I talk about Europe, I mean Europe as a whole. This is a problem that has to be dealt with at a higher level, and today this level goes even beyond Europe to the United Nations. We cannot solve these problems without a strong intervention on the part of the United Nations. It is true that there is some reluctancy on the part of Russia, but then again we have another aspect here, that of external frontiers, because if the situation in the Balkans and in Ukraine deteriorates, then we will have refugees coming from those areas as well. So we need short-term interventions, and I believe that today we need to intervene in Libya to control the situation, to avoid that refugees from this country overflow towards Europe. We do not want that the Mediterranean becomes a cemetery of refugees, and we have to avoid that people fleeing from Asia or Africa are dealt with as if they were not even human, and we don't want these people to be seen as goods rather than as people and human beings. And for instance, these people sometimes don't even have the right to have their own pharmaceuticals with them if they need them. You know the case of that young girl who died. So, well, it's only the United Nations that can actually intervene. Italy obviously has to participate because historically it has a very strong knowledge of this country. But we also have to make sure that the number of refugees decreases, the number of refugees coming from Libya. How can we do this? And this is actually the key question that we are going to deal with this afternoon. We need to start a policy of cooperation that has to be different from the policy we had in the past. The European funds that go to, for instance, Ethiopia to build infrastructures, well, that money often end up in the hands of the Chinese, who participate in public calls and procurements in Ethiopia. So this is not respect of human rights. So, well, we need a cooperation strategy that can help these countries develop from economic point of view, because if people don't have enough money to eat and feed their children, they flee their country and they look for some place where they can actually live better. And for them, Europe is like a promised land, for instance, for people from Nigeria, from Somalia, from Somali people living outside Mogadishu, for instance, or people living in extreme conditions. Well, this is what we have to do to make economy grow, investing more, because this means then spending less on immigration. So this is one of the main elements. So economic growth obviously takes away the market of hidden immigration and stops those who want to take advantage of this situation to create something that is even more dangerous than the Al-Qaeda project, that is to say the Great Caliphate, which is, some kind of hegemonic dream to have a great state, an Islam state, from the Middle East to Libya, with hundreds of millions of people that obviously would be based on a concept that is against Europe and would destabilize the Mediterranean region. The ISIS, as everyone knows, exploit the economic difficulties of Italy. The Italian ambassador in Iraq knows very well how in some countries, like in Syria or Iraq, ISIS, in order to attract militants, builds infrastructures, offers jobs, the same as mafia in Italy in a way. So there is, since the government, the state cannot provide people with a job, then these organizations intervene. For instance, in different countries, the microcredits made it possible for small enterprises to become independent, and they are no longer a tool in the hands of extremists. They can now work. They have found a way to support themselves and their families. So we need to support these governments with a political action, to support those governments that have this kind of vision. So this is not a question of conversion, but these are governments that have a Pacific view of the Mediterranean region. So, well, governments that are favorable to growth and cooperation between the West, the Middle East and North Africa. Without this economic strategy, we cannot achieve our goals. We have tried to support European enterprises in Northern Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, to help these countries from the economic point of view, with joint ventures, with the participation of European enterprises. For instance, the Tunisian government selected 15 European entrepreneurs who became consultants of the country, of the government, for the reconstruction of the country after the famous Arab Spring. So this is a way we have tried to counter fundamentalism. Professor Grimm, in his study, says quite rightly that when there's a dialogue with countries like Egypt, which is a country with a certain Christian community, 8-10 million in Egypt, interreligious dialogue favors economic growth because if there is cooperation, it is easier to work, for instance. The same should happen in the Palestinian territories. The fundamentalist Islamic world doesn't help the dialogue between Muslim Palestinians and Christian Palestinians. On the contrary, we should actually support this dialogue, also because the Christian Palestinians can be a way to bring peace to that region. So this dialogue has to be encouraged. The religious dialogue is extremely important in Europe as well. And this is important also to stop fundamentalism. If we manage to create a dialogue, not only among religious heads, for instance, the head rabbi of Rome and the head imam of France, it is easy to find a dialogue, but then it's not so easy to have the same dialogue among the people. So this has to be done also starting from with the children. Schools and then universities need to become places where young people learn tolerance, respect, and specifically respect for everything that is different. Religion is something not only private, but it's something public in a way. But, well, even those who do not believe in God talk about God when they say we don't believe in God, we don't have any religion. So this is something that is extremely important. In November, you're all invited to participate in an event in Brussels on education on interreligious dialogue. Why is it important to have a dialogue between Muslims, Jewish and Christians, the three main monotheistic religions that are involved in these problems in Europe? Well, because if we manage to do that in Europe, then we will be giving a very important message to Muslim countries, for instance. The message would be, why should you prosecute Christians in Iraq or in Pakistan if the Muslim living in Brussels or in Madrid or in Vilnius are not persecuted? So this becomes, in a way, a way to educate people that has to be done also through social networks. So it's a long-term project. So on the short term, a very strong UN action linked also with economy, with education. Europe has to do more. We have a foreign policy which is too weak. We have defense policy which is too weak. Here again, if we had a European army, we could have this army intervene to guarantee, for instance, the presence of camps where refugees could be treated like human beings. Then, as I was saying before, Europe should invest more in cooperation that needs to aim at creating business, some kind of economic democracy to create economic enterprises. If a foundation creates microcredits like the foundation of Fouad Makhzoumi, we can do more ourselves to encourage, to foster the creation of small enterprises. Because if we don't do it, then ISIS will do it, and then this could become very dangerous. This is the same model, as I said, as mafia and 'ndrangheta operate in Italy. If the government, if the state is not there to provide people with jobs, then these associations provide people with jobs, and criminality increases. The ISIS pays for its soldiers, its militants. If people don't have an employment, then if they need money, if they need to earn money, they become militants. So, well, a different economic policy would help in this case. And then there is also a lot to do to reinforce the interreligious dialogue. Here again, we need to invest more in economic terms, in universities, in schools, and in subsidiarity as well. That is to say, the subsidiarity, horizontal organizations can do more. Here at the meeting, we had different events. We know many associations and where people from different religions sit around the same table. These people know each other and start talking, and then hatred simply disappears. And we have to teach children to behave this way. So that's all on my part. There are so many different themes that are interwoven, and so that's why I've been talking about different aspects. Thank you. Now, Lucio Battistotti, who is the head of the representation in Italy of the European Commission. He has a long experience, over 30 years, in European institutions, so he knows European institutions very well. He was responsible for the communication campaign for Euro and economic affairs. Maybe we need a new Euro campaign, but this is completely off the topic. And so, well, Lucio Battistotti will talk again about the European approach.
I would like to thank the organizers of the meeting. It's my third time of the meeting, and first two times I was there with Mr. Barroso, and the second time I was with Vice President Tajani. At that time I was Vice President of the European Commission, and this is the third time for me, and I'm very honored because I'm among the speakers and I can try to give my contribution about this topic and the contribution of Europe to the dialogue. I would like to start with a quote by Borges. And I would like to quote his words: "It's much easier to die for a religion than try to live it fully." This is taken from a novel of 1962, Labyrinth. And so I would really like the European Commission to work in order to prevent that from happening, because Borges expresses himself in a quiet sort of extreme way, but it always goes straight to the point. It's much easier to die for a religion instead of living that religion fully and completely. Well, these words are heavy, but just because of this, the European Commission has been working on this topic hardly, and it's working with churches, religious associations, philosophical and non-confessional associations. So the dialogue among religions is a very important topic. It is also the responsibility of Franz Timmermans, one of the Vice President of the Commission, and in last June, together with Vice President Tajani, he organized a high-level meeting with top leaders from the main religions of the world, And the debate topic was living together and accepting diversity. Why is this so important? And the title already was a very important starting point, because we are faced with a Europe continent welcoming hundreds of thousands of refugees and immigrants, and so diversity is increasing, and every year Europe welcomes thousands of people who have different principles and values, and so we really need to build this dialogue together. We need to live together. This is the great challenge for Europe over the next years, trying to understand these people, get to know these people, and establish a sort of mutual, fruitful relationship, also to lay the foundations of a better economic future for everybody. These people are fleeing countries where there are wars, tensions, conflicts. So these people are trying to rely on Europe for a better future. Well, that meeting had been preceded on June the 2nd by another meeting with representatives of philosophical and non-confessional associations and organizations from all over Europe. So as you can see, the European Commission is trying to foster meetings among religious leaders. That was the 11th edition. So this dialogue started a long time ago, and that started also with other important people that fostered it. Then it was formalized from 2005 on, and since 2009 the dialogue with churches and associations was put into the Lisbon Treaty, Article 17 of the Lisbon Treaty. So the member states have officially acknowledged the importance of fostering this dialogue. I would like now to make another couple of quotes and quotations from the words of Franz Timmermans, his speech of June the 16th. So on that occasion he said, this dialogue is very important now more than ever, because our societies are faced with unparalleled challenges, and our churches can really play an important role in promoting social cohesion and filling the existing gaps. The leaders who are here today are part of the European Commission, and here they can try to share with the European Commission their experiences when fighting against any form of extremism and discrimination, trying to create a mutual climate of common understanding and mutual understanding. So Antonio, I would like also to quote your words, what you said on that occasion. So radicalism and fundamentalism can be sort of really fought against only if we unite ourselves. So the dialogue amongst religions is essential to our societies and our future. So European member states really need to promote that with religious leaders and religious experts, and also involving young people. So we're here today also because of that, because the very first time I came here to Rimini and attended the meeting, I was deeply impressed and struck by the great number of young people. These young people are so committed, so involved. These people are active people. They are not just there to listen passively, they are doers, and it is very important. So involving young people and young generations is important. We need to invest more in our economies, but also in the future of our youngsters. We need policies promoting basic principles and beliefs like peace, solidarity, and the respect of human dignity among generations. I would also like to share with you another couple of things that the European Commission is doing practically to promote this kind of dialogue. For instance, the European Commission tries to promote the European spirit by promoting this dialogue, and also tries to finance and support projects aimed at favoring intercultural comprehension, understanding, also with the goal of favoring religious dialogue. So we have Europe for Citizens 2014-2020. So projects are co-financed for a total budget of 185 million euros. This budget is aimed at promoting projects that promote mutual respect and understanding, and also promoting the engagement and commitment of civil society. Then we have citizenship, rights and equality, another major program for 2014-2020 is financing this year projects aimed at fighting against against anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim movements and phenomena. Fortunately, well, in Europe, we don't have phenomena against Christians, but we need to fight against forms of discrimination and hatred against Muslim and Jewish people. So we really need to fight against any form of promotion of hatred, also through social network. We need to try to promote good practices. There are legal and political tools that can really do a lot at national and local level. And then there are specific forms of crimes related to hatred and promotion of hatred. And again, the European legislation has done a lot in that respect. In particular, there is a framework decision on the fight against racism and xenophobia through specific criminal law tools. And then in November 2015, new measures are going to be adopted in order to meaningfully improve the victims of such crimes. Moreover, we have a sensitizing network to fight against any forms of radicalism and extremism that was originally carried out in 2011. Then we have a single market and digital agenda that also try to reduce the number of discrimination phenomena and trying to promote measures fighting against radicalism. So the European Commission and European member states are well aware of the importance of promoting cohesion and understanding in order to favor a bottom-up approach and to favor solidarity and empathy amongst the people. This is very important and more and more essential in a growingly complex society. So acknowledging officially solidarity as a key topic, as a key concept, not only in terms of official notion promoted by the state, but also a bottom-up solidarity that needs to be promoted and fostered by social movements. So on June the 2nd and 16th, several topics were debated. So trying to favor the relationship between societies and citizens, how to lay the foundations of new societies where people deeply share, truly share the European values. And this is extremely important for European citizens to recover a sort of a sense of awareness of its own beliefs. So we're going through a deep crisis also in terms of communication. European citizens do not fully perceive the role of social European institutions and the role of European institutions in general because they lost sight of their roles. It was much easier to identify the final goal of the European project from 1958 on, but then at one point, in 1989, the fall of the wall, changed so radically and so deeply global paradigms that Europe has lost sight of some commonly shared beliefs, of some common identity. It's not that we lost that identity. It's not that we have a single identity, but, and Europe is beautiful because it's made of several identities, so united in diversity. So diversity is a key sort of founding principle of Europe, but then we also need to recover some common grounds to set commonly shared goals. We are aware, we need to be aware of our commonly shared beliefs and principles and values. This is the only way to be ready to welcome and get to know all the people that come to us every year in thousands. So I've almost come to the end of my speech. So bear with me another couple of minutes. I will cut a bit my speech because I had prepared too much, certainly. So again, within this context, the European Union really has to go back to its roots when it comes to the original European integration project, trying to lay the foundation of a better future, trying to leave behind the terrible sort of blood shedding that happened in the past. And it is important to fight against any form of insecurity and discrimination and exclusion. Every citizen, every community needs to feel safe and home and secure. We need to promote an open society based on basic human rights. And also we need to be open enough to favor exchange and mutual acknowledgement and acceptance. So these are the key laying foundations to build a better future for our continent. Well, to sum up, the European Commission really needs to keep on working in order to make Europe come true. Especially Lucien Febvre, a French historian, talked about this during the winter 44-45 at the Collège de France. And Lucien Febvre at that time gave a beautiful definition of Europe. I really like to quote it because I consider it the most beautiful I ever heard. And this is the following: Europe is a civilization that can consolidate itself and expand, provided that it doesn't want to dominate other civilizations. So it is fully animated. It's a tool of mutual understanding and not of domination. Thank you very much. Well, in the meantime, I welcome Ambassador Valensise, who is finally with us. Thank you very much, not just because of this beautiful quotation, but sometimes in order to go back to our roots, we need to travel in time in the past and go back to 6 years ago to our founding fathers. We should maybe refer to our children, not only to the founding fathers. We may try to get inspiration from other sources, especially when it comes to the future and the young generations. And 185 million euros allocated for projects of this kind, well, this is beautiful. There are so many young people here, startups, so please, so bring it on. There's so much available, so try to share your ideas. But now we have to go on, and sorry for being a bit late, and sorry maybe for cutting you a bit abruptly. So we have Brian Grimm coming from the US, so we welcome him very warmly for the long journey, traveled long to be here. He's the president of the Religious Freedom and Business Foundation, member of the World Economic Forum, and he's also a consultant on for the Tony Blair Faith Foundation. And maybe some of you can remember that Tony Blair was one of our guests. He's also one of the top experts when it comes to the socio-economic impact of religious freedom. So, well, certainly his presence is perfect here. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. And I'd like to congratulate you on this fabulous meeting. Just this panel is such an excellent example of the principles of joining business, government, and civil society together with grassroots to solve world problems. So I'd like to share a PowerPoint if it comes up. So I'm going to give 2 facts about extremism and 2 opposing strategies on what to do about it. On Monday, I'll be speaking at the World Economic Forum in Geneva. And there I'll be talking about the research showing that where there's religious freedom, there is better climates for business. But today I'm going to focus just on extremism. So the 2 facts. The first fact is that a poor economy does not cause extremism. There are very poor countries with no extremism. There are very rich countries that have extremism. And extremism is not just a product of any one religion. In Norway, Andre Breivik killed 77 people, and Norway is a very rich country. In London, 3 schoolgirls gave up on the British dream and went to join ISIS. And also on the streets of London, a British soldier was hacked to death by 2 jihadists. Well, the second fact, though, is that there are multiple pathways into extremism. For instance, Breivik, he was a nationalist. Perhaps he was a psychotic. These things led him into extremism. The schoolgirls didn't find any meaning in passing the next 2 tests they had to take. They wanted a bigger meaning in life. They wanted to be significant. And the killers of the British soldier in London, you may be surprised to know that their names were not Mohammed. Their names were Michael. They grew up as Christians, and they were attracted to jihad as a shortcut to fame and to even corrupt spiritual significance. Well, these are things that the research is showing. Well, there's 2 opposing strategies when thinking about these things. Let me give ISIS's perspective. So ISIS began in Syria a few years ago, and they noticed northern Iraq had a special circumstance that created an opening for them. In a survey that we did at the Pew Research Center, we asked people in Iraq, what are your biggest concerns? This was the year before ISIS came into Iraq. Well, number 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Number 5 was ethnic conflict. Number 4, religious conflict. Number 3, corruption. Number 2, crime. And what was the top concern? Unemployment. ISIS looks at this situation and thinks, opportunity. Now, business leaders can also look at an opportunity like that and think, we have an educated population, there's natural resources, we could go in and start business. ISIS thought we could go in and start business too. Well, the second strategy could be how business can be profitable for peace. So with the United Nations, we're working on a Business for Peace initiative. And last year, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon helped us launch it in Indonesia. And our initial findings were that there's 4 ways that business can support peace. So they can use markets to cross borders. They can support social entrepreneurs. They can boost workforce diversity. They can reward intercultural understanding. So one company that does this is BMW Group. Every year they give an award to 10 companies that are fostering these kinds of understanding. Fouad is an example of a big company. But here's an example of a small company. These two guys are from Jerusalem. One's Jewish and one's Muslim. And they received the award for their tourism company that helps bring people to see the Holy Lands from a Muslim perspective, a Jewish perspective, a Christian perspective. And they've been making a lot of money. Now they're now in 8 countries in the Middle East, making money and making peace. Well, that's an example. So to reward this, working with the United Nations, we'll be giving awards during the Olympics next year for Business and Interfaith Understanding Peace Awards for small companies, multinational companies, entrepreneurs, and companies led by women. So to bring to the attention of the world, just like today, that business can be a very powerful force for interfaith understanding and for peace. Well, let me give an example of a grassroots program. An example of how business plus interfaith work can be an antidote to violent extremism. Earlier this year, Lord Michael Hastings hosted us at the House of Lords to discuss this project. And the project builds on using religious freedom to counter violent extremism. And the basis is very simple. It's based just on a story from the Bible. Some of you may know it. It's the Good Samaritan story. And as a lawyer came up to Jesus, he asked him, what do I need to do to have eternal life? And Jesus said, well, what do the scriptures say? What does the Old Testament say? The Torah. And he said, well, to love God and to love my neighbor. But then he said, but who's my neighbor? And so Jesus told the story of the Good Samaritan. And who was the Samaritan? He wasn't Jewish. He was a foreigner with a foreign religion who helped pick up the man from the road. And he said, that's who your neighbor is. That's who we love. So using that, people of faith need to join together and just simply love their neighbor. But when you combine that idea with business, the possibilities are so powerful. So a pilot we're doing in London this year that will be a model to roll out across Europe and then throughout the world is what we call Empowerment Plus. We counter radicalization through mentoring relationships with business people, integrative business, and self-reliance or empowerment. And through 12-week courses, we give people practical skills in jobs, getting an education, or starting your own business. And these are done in groups. So I'll conclude just with one example. You may have heard of Jihadi John. He's the guy in ISIS who's been slitting Westerners' throats on video. Well, he was actually an entrepreneur trained in computer science, but he lost the vision for how that business skill could contribute to the betterment of society. The missing element was the ethic of loving your neighbor and using that business as a way to help people succeed and changing society for the good. So I think in this meeting, bringing together business people, government leaders, civil society, and grassroots, we have the power to counteract extremism. It just takes putting into practice a simple principle, loving your neighbor. Thank you.
Beh, grazie Brian, perché il lavoro della...
Thank you very much, Brian. The work of your foundation is very interesting. I read a lot about it, and really their papers and analysis are very, very interesting. So you can really find out a lot. So also some of the examples that he made gave us a clear idea what they do, and I'm very happy about this new friend of the meeting. Thank you very much for joining the family. And now I would like to present you with Fouad Makhzoumi, introduce him. He's a great entrepreneur. He was born in Lebanon, and then he studied in the US, and he started his business in Saudi Arabia. And then step after step, well, as any other entrepreneur with a vision, with a broader perspective, then he had no limits. I mean, thanks to his ability and also thanks to his cultural approach, and this is the most interesting element, that's why we invited him here today. He was able to establish a large international group, and as I said, they have over 3,500 staff all over the world in several countries, especially in Europe, the Middle East, but also Thailand, Asia, Singapore. So his point of view, after what we heard from Brian Grimm, is extremely meaningful and interesting. So, and again, this is another discovery for us. His presence is a great sort of opportunity, and we hope it's the beginning of a new friendship.
Thank you for inviting us to this fantastic meeting. And when I see the mix of audience, I believe we have a chance, as Brian has said, that we can build on the future. Historically, when I'm invited to conferences about the Euromed, North and South, we don't see young people. Mostly are above their 70s, which is very important from an experience point of view, but I don't think we can build on them for the future. I don't know the percentage of Muslims, Christians, and Jews here. But it's very important if we're going to achieve any results, is to have the grassroots actually participating in discussions like this. Intellectuals, they understand the importance of dialogue, because without religious freedom, economy can never be developed. development can never be achieved. Religious freedom is the pillar of development and economical growth. I'm not going to go through the history of Christianity and Islam because I think all of you, you know that. But I have to mention in the 16th and 17th century, Europe and Catholicism went through 150 years of wars to achieve ultimately the separation of church and state. In the United States, it took them until 1776 and the Virginia Declaration to accept religious freedom. The Muslim world, for 1400 years, we have been trying to find out exactly what do we need to do, because most of our political regimes, and especially the politicians, they abuse religion to justify dictatorship and staying in power. I remember an experience after 9/11. I'm a member of the US Middle East project that we work on the peace process from 1993. The chairman of the board, General Brent Scowcroft, invited some of us to go to the White House 3 weeks after 9/11. In the discussion in the White House with senior officials, we were told that we, the Arabs, have to decide, are we with the United States or we are against the United States? My reaction was, I did not fly from Lebanon if I agree with Osama bin Laden. We oppose terrorism, we oppose these vicious acts, but it is important that the West understand us so that we can work together to fight this move of terrorism. Since 1948, most of the Arab countries use the pretext of the existence of Israel to justify moving the countries into dictatorship and police regimes, under the pretext that we need to protect the country from Israel, so we removed all the civil societies and civil rights from our people. 60%, between 40 to 60%, depending on what reserves we can calculate, of the energy of the world comes from the region, North Africa and the Middle East, including Iran and Iraq. When the whole world, the income per capita was improved from 2004 to 2009, the income per capita in the Middle East improved by between 7 to 8%. The lack of democracy in the region, which is being abused by the politician not to allow religious freedom, has created a disparity in wealth that we have heard about Mubarak, we've heard about Saddam Hussein, we've heard about Gaddafi, and now Ali Abdullah Saleh. We're talking in the tens of billions of dollars of their personal wealth, when the average income per capita for a Yemeni is under $200 per month. If we are going now to be fighting terrorism, Europe, and I agree with the Commissioner, Europe cannot anymore sit and say this is way away from us. You're getting thousands of people every day crossing the water from Africa into Italy. What we need to work together is to make sure to understand that the mentality of the Muslims is a little bit different when it comes to the grassroots. Daesh did not succeed in claiming the caliphate because after the Sykes-Picot Agreement and the Ottoman Empire collapsed in 1924, some of the Arab leaders and the Arab religious powers did not accept the principle of a nation state because they believe that the nation state concept is a Western concept that was forced on the region. And that's now when Daesh tries to promote the caliphate, as Brian has said, there are people that they see in that a revival of history, and that's why they are joining all these fundamentalist movements. Of course, we can go on and explain the difference between different Islam, but it is very important to touch on the agreement between the United States and Iran. As you know, the Arabs, we have two big countries that they lead the two segments of Islam in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia for the Sunni Islam and Iran for the Shiite Islam. According to the Shiites, they can get their direction and their divine directions through a leader. It means you have Al-Mahdi, the mullahs, and then you have the people. Catholicism is the same. It goes through the Pope all the way down through the system. When it comes to the Sunnis, because the origin of Islam, we never believed in a hierarchy, it means each individual can have access to the divine instructions by communicating to God directly. And that's why a deal with Iran may control Hezbollah, Syria, Iran, and all of this, while a deal with the so-called Sunnis, we have a problem. Because we all recognize that when Osama bin Laden could not control Al-Qaeda, he was challenged by Zawahiri, by Zarqawi, and by others, which means there is no clear hierarchy within the Sunni community. And that's why if we do not engage by education and employment, the grassroots, to explain really what's the text of Islam, we're going to be losing this war. At the end of the day, we in the foundation in Lebanon, I went back to Beirut in 1992. Population of Lebanon is 4 million. We started a training with the USAID for the microcredit program. There are over 10,000 beneficiaries today that they own their own businesses with a combination of 3 to 5 people. We've trained hundreds of thousands of people in vocational training. Most of these people are not carrying arms today because you're giving them the dignity in order to find a job rather than to wait in line to try to get your $500 from Daesh or ISIS in order to go and kill. In my conclusion, I would say, according to a study conducted in 2011 by Georgetown and Brigham Young University, religious freedom is one of the factors significantly associated with global economical growth. The research compared the GDP growth of 173 countries and found a positive relationship between religious freedom and 10 out of the 12 pillars of global competitiveness. According to the study, the effects of having religious freedoms, there are reduced corruption. 9 out of the 10 most corrupt countries have high or very high governmental restrictions on religion. More peace. When religious freedom are not respected, the result can be violence and conflict. Less harmful regulations. Some religious restrictions can directly affect the economic activities, creating legal barriers for import and export. Reduced liabilities. More diversity and growth. Freedom of religion can contribute to a rich pluralism that is itself associated with economical growth. A wide diversity of religious congregations in a city contributes many millions of dollars to the economy through direct spending and activities, because we need to keep in mind, true religion and true Islam teach you how to deal with your friends, with your community, and to accept others. In Islam, we say religion is not a forced idea. Either you believe in it or you don't believe in it. And in conclusion, in Europe and in the West, there is a miscomprehension. There is a difference between Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Muslim Brotherhood, or any other extremist to that effect. For me, any religious group that is willing to use force and killing to reject the others, this is a terrorist organization. So let us not try to differentiate between people that are playing politics or not. What's happening in Egypt, maybe the way the Muslim Brotherhood were badly treated after the latest coup, but there is no justification that we're having the Egyptians being killed because of religious reaction to the change of government. My suggestion is that next time you need to have more grassroots available. We need to engage them because it's very important that these people understand that the rest of the world is not against them, that the rest of the world are open for business if they are willing to be working with them and to let go of these extremist ideas, because life, everybody wants to live, and I think even the youngest people would love to live, but let's give them the alternative rather than to be joining ISIS and the Al-Qaeda. Thank you.
Thank you. Grazie. Bene, grazie Fouad Makhzoumi.
Thank you very much to Fouad Makhzoumi. Thank you for your perspective, because you really let us perceive this dramatic tension that exists now. The word goes to Mr. Valensise, so Secretary General of our Ministry for Foreign Affairs. And after a long career, well, that also brought him to Beirut during the Civil War, Brazil, Lebanon, and so many other places. So we're running out of time. And so this brings us to our discussion. So what's the contribution given by Italy when it comes to this sort of economic development that is so strictly intertwined with religious freedom? So thank you very much. Good evening. Well, I have the sensation I lost the first half of the game, so to speak, and I couldn't listen to the previous speakers, in particular the speech by Mr. Tajani, but I had a recap about it. I would like, first of all, to thank the meeting organizers for inviting me, and first of all, to congratulate on the organizers for the title they chose for this panel meeting, because we talk about economic development, and economic development can be an element that can sort of overcome religious fundamentalism. At first I thought, why, don't we have a question mark at the end? Well, but maybe it's much better, because otherwise it would be a doubt. But this is not a doubt, this is a statement. And this is very important that we share this statement and we consider that as such. This needs to be a statement. Economic development is a way to overcome religious fundamentalism. This is not a question, this is a truth. And when it comes to especially the sort of different forms of fundamentalism as extremism and terrorism, well, when it comes to this phenomena, people sometimes tend to take shortcuts and say that yes, they exist, but there are social causes, religious causes, political causes, ethnic causes. And so sometimes there's the temptation to mix up things and consider economic aspects maybe as the least important element. But actually, as Brian Graham said very clearly, there are situations and places where terrorism, it doesn't result from sort of poverty. There are countries that are very rich and that can produce terrorism. So sometimes even rich countries can produce terrorism. Let's take Saudi Arabia. There are countries, there are much poorer countries where fortunately no form of fundamentalism, terrorism, or extremism is generated. Let's think about sub-Saharan countries like Botswana, for instance. It's a very poor country, but fortunately, no terrorism, is produced by this country. So richness, poverty are not necessarily connected to the absence and presence of terrorism. And there is a great Islam expert, Gilles Kepel, who talked about two main drivers that seems to be present when it comes to terrorism and terrorist phenomena. First of all, poor urban people, so inner cities on the one hand, and on the other, some sort of religious bourgeoisie that tries to fight against the elite classes of some Islamic countries. Well, this is true on the one hand, but also, well, there's another thing to be considered, and that's why I'm appreciating so much that you didn't put a question mark at the end of the title. It is true, it is a given that the lack of perspective, poverty, and sort of the lack of opportunities can be a great incubator for extremism, fundamentalism, and sometimes also terrorism. But that said, we also need to consider other things, and I think that the previous speakers mentioned that. Brian Grimm mentioned that beforehand. There's something that could be useful. It's one of the few figures I'm going to mention, so don't be afraid. I won't overwhelm you with numbers, but this is something I want to share with you. Over the last 30 years, from 1970s to 2000, 80% of civil wars that occurred in the world happened in countries where 60% of the population was younger than 30 years old of age and was unemployed. And 60% of that population was unemployed and very young. And this should make us think about the dangerous mix of poverty, lack of growth, lack of development, and lack of perspectives and unemployment, all those drivers leading possibly to terrorism and fundamentalism. So I try to somehow bring back our debate to a political topic. So how do we react in Italy? What's the reaction of Italy as a country? What's the reaction of Europe to all this? How do Italy and Europe react to such phenomena and situations? Well, first off, I'd like to talk about Italy and not about a specific government, this one or the previous one. And at least in this sector, we have a certain continuity in terms of action. First of all, to us, it is very important to have a new kind of dialogue. So the foundations of a new dialogue for with the Mediterranean region was launched. So this is something that we have started some years ago, and we try to promote these attitudes also at European level, and we tried to promote a change in this sense, and we're happy maybe to start seeing the fruits of such approach when it comes to our new attitude towards the Mediterranean basin and the Middle East countries. So we try to submit clear ideas to our European interlocutors when it comes to the relationship with the Mediterranean countries and the Middle Eastern countries. And also, we tried to clearly say that we need resources to promote a sort of new Marshall Plan. Well, it's a quite demanding title, I know, but certainly we should try to promote such a plan with some countries with which Italy has a very fruitful dialogue. And Italy would really like to promote partnership policies, and allow me to say that Italy may do a lot and may be better than many other European and non-European countries. Well, first of all, because we do not have any sort of domination pretensions, and we have a long tradition of cooperation and partnerships, and more we try to sort of support the development of local businesses in recipient countries. We really want to favor the independence of countries, try to make them aware of the resources they have and teach them how to use them. So the idea, and this is not a new idea, I mean, this is something that stems from a long tradition, is that of trying to do what we can do at best. So trying to work as a middleman, as a sort of peacemakers, peace bringers somehow. So which are the key elements of such an approach? Which is the action I'm referring to? So there are several priorities. But specifically, I would like to underscore two things with you here this afternoon, two key issues that I keep on underscoring every time I have the opportunity to talk about this. First of all, we need to focus on young people and women. Fouad Makhzoumi is right. One way to overcome fundamentalism and extremism is that of trying to foster and promote young people, young generations. This is true. This is so true. Let's not forget that today in the world we have almost 2 billion people with an age between 10 and 24 years. So such a large sort of share of the world population has never been so young. So when it comes to young people, what should we do? Train them and favor their education and training, also vocational training. Unfortunately, some terrorist movements understood that they have to hit hard on training institutions. Let's think about Boko Haram in Nigeria. They seem to target not the headquarters of power, but instead schools, places of training, of education. So the main workshop of tolerance of tomorrow, and this is what terrorists do not want at all. So we really need to take good care of our young generations, promoting them, taking good care of them, trying to promote education and training, trying to sort of make them understand the importance of developing skills and abilities. And on top of that, we need to consider women specifically and to favor the empowerment of women. This is very important because in many countries, women go in absolutely unacceptable situations. And last but not least, there's another priority not to be forgotten, which is the following: the connection between, the waves of refugees and development. Well, migrant flows, if well managed, as they should, well, first of all, should not lead to any sort of evil sort of identification. On the contrary, they can become a very important driver of economic growth. According to the figures submitted by the World Bank, the, let's say, diaspora of African migrants over the years has generated sort of incomes for $436 billion of business, of, sort of money flow, and this is huge. And if we were also maybe to calculate the unofficial figures, maybe they would be even higher. So again, there was a resource transfer that was enormous, and maybe was even bigger if we consider gray figures. Well, let's go back to Italy and what the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, as it is now called, because a brand new law was adopted by our parliament in 2014 with reorganizing our Ministry for Foreign Affairs, including international cooperation activities. Well, let's see some key examples just to give an idea of what we're doing and specifically of how we rely on cooperation today. Well, I didn't see many people because lighting is too strong in my eyes, but I hope young people are there listening to us. I hope that NGOs representatives and association representatives are there, because you are our best sort of partners when it comes to developing and promoting such policies and approaches. Let's see some key examples just to make you better understand what I'm talking about, and just trying to make you understand to what extent we consider this cooperation approach important and strategic also to overcome fundamentalism and terrorism. We have a good track record in Africa. Some actions are underway in the Sahel region when it comes to vocational training. And also we are cooperating with some Mediterranean countries like Tunisia and Morocco. Important initiatives have been rolled out in those countries to promote interfaith dialogue on the one hand, and to promote local entrepreneurs on the other hand. So supporting microcredit, especially when it comes to young sorts of age groups of the population. Moreover, there are some development support programs favoring agriculture and farming activities. So these countries need to sort of promote their traditional activities and not embrace brand new models that are foreign to them and their traditions. And then I want to talk about Afghanistan. Not just to remind you of the great commitment and contribution of Italy to the situation of the countries, because we have done a lot in military and cooperation terms. Well, we usually complain about Italy as Italians, but if you have a closer look at what we do, if you have a closer look at what we are able of doing sometimes, especially when we cross the borders, I think we can be really proud of our country. And when it comes to Afghanistan, I think and I hope that you're going to be struck by one figure. 14 years ago, so when the Taliban regime was still there was 1 million people in Afghanistan going to school. So 14 years after the operations of Western countries, including Italy, today we have 8 million young people being trained and educated. There were 21,000 teachers when the Taliban were there. Now we have 190,000. So again, this is a great achievement thanks to international action, and Italy gave its contribution to this. And we had casualties. We need to pay homage to their action and contribution and commitment. And well, we are still working there, so we're not through yet. So we're still working in Afghanistan. And Italy is planning, together with other countries, to remain there, to continue this action, and to keep on working to favor the promotion and development of Afghanistan. I want to sum up by saying that in a few days in New York, a new global agenda is going to be adopted for world development until 2030. New goals are going to be set, and in particular, developed countries and industrialized countries are going to play their role. And we need ideas. Fortunately, we have plenty of them. We need passion, and thanks God we have plenty of it. But we also need resources. And thanks God, we hope to have some. We don't have many now, but we hope to gather some more. I say it because now, well, cooperation policies and supporting policies, in other words, the tools we have to respond to this great challenge in terms of using economic development as a tool to overcome fundamentalism and extremism and terrorism, well, the resources we have now, well, are not enough. So I leave you with this sort of remark. You heard what we are doing, and you heard what our partners and neighbors are doing. Italy has allocated 0.16% of its national budget to such activities. France has allocated 0.36%, Germany 0.41%, and the UK 0.71%. Again, let's think over it, and let's try together to work hard to improve the amount of resources just to promote regions that really deserve to be supported and promoted for their interests and for our interests, because these interests are clearly, strictly intertwined. And moreover, when it comes to expenditure for cooperation, gives us great returns in terms of contribution to the future of our societies. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a fruitful sort of meeting. So thank you very much, because in this same room a few hours ago we had a great encounter with the First Lady of Afghanistan, Mrs. Rula Ghani. So again, there's a friendship among our countries, and thank you very much for mentioning this great cooperation. Well, we would have liked to have a second round, but we have run out of time because there's a new sort of panel that needs to get here, and so unfortunately we cannot go on, and there should not be overlappings in order to allow people enjoy and join all of the meetings of these events. But thank you very much for sharing this moment with us. As Antonio Tajani said in the beginning, well, the European Union is doing a lot, and this is important. Let's not forget it. And so you should promote what is being done. So please let us know what you're doing, and also thank you very much for the great results of the foundation led by Brian Greene. We certainly understood the importance of such studies. So again, I really hope that this is just the beginning of a long-term relationship with the meeting, and the great personality and aura of Mr. Makhzoumi. And just thank you for sharing with us your passion and showing us that anything is possible anywhere in the world. And also we ended up with Ambassador Valensise, who somehow ideally closed our remarks, telling us what Italy is doing in terms of practical contributions. Thank you very much, and all the best for your future. Thank you.